Welcome back! I'm Deborah Jones and we're machine embroidering with knits. In this lesson, we'll talk about polar fleece and other plush knits. Polar fleece is very popular for things like stadium blankets and jackets. Minky is a type of plush that's popular for bath wraps and baby blankets. They come in different weights, but they basically all embroider the same. Lettering can look nice and rich on a base of polar fleece, and we just want to keep in mind that we use some special programming techniques to keep the lettering up above, looking crisp and bold on top of this deep pile material. To do that, we want to use a double zigzag underlay. Double zigzag underlay works in addition to your water-soluble topping, and it doubles the amount of zigzag that is underneath your stitching, and that's going to control the pile throughout the life of the item, keeping the plush beneath the stitching and the stitching up on top of the fabric. There are other things that you need to consider in your programming, such as the width of your letters. The width needs to be nice and bold, so you're going to add some pull compensation. That simply means that we're compensating for the pull of the thread on this knit material to keep our columns nice and wide. So I recommend that you add 20% percentage or proportional pull compensation. We don't use fixed or absolute pull compensation when working with lettering. So this 20% additional width will make sure that your lettering looks nice and bold like this. The last thing we need to think about in our programming is the density. We want to use about 3 points on our stitch spacing in our density for lettering on polar fleece. You can also bump up the density slightly on your underlay. I'm going to show you how to hoop in a 2-ring hoop on polar fleece, and you needn't be afraid of leaving a permanent ring on polar fleece. It bounces right back, especially if you just put a bit of moisture on it. And this heavy design, like this teddy bear, is fully supported using a soft tearaway in a weight of about 1.8 to 2 ounces. A soft tearaway is suitable for this knit because it has body to support the embroidery. You don't want to use a crisp or firm tearaway because it doesn't provide the proper support. But I'm going to show you how to hoop with a soft tearaway on polar fleece. And this example was embroidered using a soft tearaway, and it gives a very nice result, as you can see. So let's get hooping. First, I'm going to pre-tension my hoop because this is a somewhat thicker fabric than I have been embroidering, so I need to loosen my hoop a bit up for starters and test. And I'm just going to hoop this in the corner and at an angle, which is the traditional way to hoop on an infant or youth blanket. So we want to pre-tension as close as we can get to the bottom is the location that we want to hoop, and because it's a knit, we certainly want to fully cover the hoop with the stabilizer. And I'm going to scoot my hoop to the corner and test it. That's pretty good, but I'm going to tighten it just a bit and hoop again. Good. I like that setting. You don't want to have it too tight because you don't want to force that fabric toward the center of the hoop, as we've mentioned before. So I'm going to place my topping in the hoop, and that's going to give a nice smooth stitching surface, and I'm using the mid-weight water-soluble like Super Solvy because this is a very deep pile material. So I'm just going to get my hoop centered up here as close to the corner as I can place it, and then press my inner ring pretty much right straight down on this particular fabric, and then give that extra push that countersinks or recesses the inner ring slightly lower than the outer ring if your hoop allows that. And it's ready to go into the machine. Next, we're going to use a different hooping technique that uses a different type of stabilizer. Now I'm going to show you how to hoop a plush knit for embroidery using sticky Fabri-Solvi or a similar melt-away mesh. And some people hoop this by peeling away the protective paper and simply applying their inner ring directly to the sticky surface. I'm going to show you a way to keep your hoops clean and use this wonderful stabilizer without the sticky mess on your hoops. So first you want to hoop it fairly tightly, and in this instance it is okay to go ahead and tighten after the backing is in the hoop because we want to hold this very securely. And I am going to go ahead and recess the inner ring. Next, I'm going to score the paper covering using just a pin. You could use an old pair of scissor tips or an awl or a scribe or similar tool, but a pin or a used needle will work just fine. So after you have scored the surface, then we're going to lift the paper covering and simply pull it away and expose the sticky surface. So we're going to embroider this with the background frame, and if you don't have one, we've provided one in your course materials. And the reason I like to use a background frame is because it lets the lettering stand out very clearly against a pattern like this because it masks out the pattern, and you want to use a thread color that is in your fabric, and you're going to be able to see the lettering very clearly on top of this pattern without it interfering. So now we'll put this in the machine and see how a background frame works. We won't be using water-soluble topping because our background frame is going to hold down the plush pile. Now the machine has finished stitching our background frame with a name. And it really came out great. And I love to use this technique because we save on water-soluble topping. The sheer background is going to not only mask out the print, but it also keeps the pile controlled for the life of the blanket. So it really lets this stand out like it should and be nice and clear. Now we'll remove this backing. So I'm going to just trim away the excess. You might want to use an older pair of scissors for this to keep the sticky off your blades. And you're going to be probably surprised at just how easily this dissolves. So we're just going to spritz it. And then you'll see that you can actually just pull it at the edges, and because it's dissolving, there's absolutely nothing left on the back of your blanket to be distracting, and the front is fully supported. Next, we'll use a technique that makes the polar fleece the star through use of negative space. This technique is a lot of fun because it makes use of negative space created by the plush fabric popping through a base fill, creating an embossed effect. I've hooped my fabric using a water-soluble mesh self-adhesive stabilizer. We don't need water-soluble topping for this technique. I'm going to go ahead and pop it in the machine and let's get started. The reason we don't need a water-soluble topping for this technique is that we want the plush to pop up from inside this base area of stitching, then let the design emerge. You'll see what I mean as we stitch along. So you can see how our design has popped right out, making great use of negative space and our plush knit, the polar fleece. I hope you'll have some fun with this technique, and you want to be sure to use a similar color thread so that you get that embossed effect. So that's it for plush and polar fleece. Next, we'll look at the ultimate knit, sweaters and their bulky cousins, and I'll show you a stabilizer option that's completely different and may surprise you.